All right, let's jump right into this explainer with what might just be the most deeply disturbing society experiment ever run. It's a story that starts out in a completely perfect world. Imagine it, no predators, no disease, unlimited resources, a literal utopia. But as we're about to see, perfection has a really dark side. We're going to unpack an experiment known as Universe 25. And I promise you, by the time we're done here, the way you think about comfort and society is going to completely change.
So, the number you really need to keep in mind to understand this whole thing is 0. In this perfectly enclosed world, exactly 0 deaths were caused by disease. 0 deaths were caused by predators. In fact, 0 deaths were caused by absolutely anything a veterinarian could have traditionally diagnosed. The water never ran out, the food literally never ran out, the temperature was perfectly controlled, and the space was cleaned meticulously. Picture this, it's 1968. An American ethologist named John Calhoun takes 8 completely healthy mice, 4 males, 4 females, and places them into an absolute paradise. I mean, these were the healthiest specimens he could possibly get his hands on, completely free of any physical dangers. They had soft nesting materials in every corner, and their environment was engineered from top to bottom to be completely stress-free. But, and this is where the data takes a really sharp, terrifying turn, within just 5 years, that entire population was totally and irreversibly extinct. It plunges us into this fascinating mystery. If there was no starvation, no disease, and absolutely no predators, what actually killed them? What on earth could wipe out an entire population living in perfect abundance? Section 1, A Paradise for Mice, Designing Universe 25. To really grasp how this all fell apart, we gotta look at how it was built. You see, Calhoun spent his entire career obsessing over one highly specific question: what actually happens to a society when nothing is hard anymore? He'd actually run 24 previous versions of this experiment, but Universe 25? This was meant to be the ultimate, flawless test. He built this 9-foot square utopia inside a federal research lab in Maryland, complete with what he called walk-up apartments along the walls that they could reach by mesh tunnels. Every single apartment had endless hoppers for food and endless water bottles. Based on the physical space and resources, Calhoun calculated this paradise could comfortably hold 3,800 mice. Okay, so things escalated incredibly fast after a peaceful start. For the first 100 days or so, the original 8 mice mostly just explored, learned the geography, and settled in. But then, the litters were born. By day 104, the population began doubling every 55 days. Boom. By day 315, you've got over 600 animals abruptly jostling for space, sleeping in huge piles, and just climbing all over each other. Moving on to Section 2, the behavioral sink. When utopia cracks. So as the population outgrew the available social space, the surplus young males suddenly had absolutely nowhere to go, and the society began to fracture into 2 horrifying extremes. On one hand, you had the listless males. Because they had no territory to defend and literally no role to fill, they just drifted into the center of the enclosure. They became completely apathetic punching bags. If they were attacked, they wouldn't even fight back. They just take the damage, walk a few feet away, and lie down. Then, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you had the frantic males. These guys became hyperactive, indiscriminate aggressors, moving relentlessly through the enclosure, violently forcing their way into nests, and totally skipping the normal courtship rituals that every other mouse naturally followed. Calhoun noticed something completely bizarre happening here, which he officially named the behavioral sink. It's absolutely fascinating. Even though food was equally and endlessly available everywhere in the enclosure, the mice developed this compulsive instinct to crowd around just a few specific feeding stations. The presence of others became so tightly wired into their feeding instinct that they straight up refused to eat alone. An empty feeder, no matter how full of fresh food, was completely useless to them. They were literally crushing each other just to eat at crowded stations, while perfectly good, identical food sat untouched just a few feet away. Wild, right? Well, as you can imagine, the social fabric essentially died here. The exhausted, dominant males just threw their hands up and stopped protecting their families. This left the mothers to defend the nests entirely alone, all while they were still nursing. The stress was immense, and it led to some truly horrific outcomes. Mothers began abandoning their pups. Some completely forgot which pups were even theirs. And in the worst stretches, mothers actually turned on their own young. In some sections of this supposed paradise, fewer than 1 in 20 newborn pups survived. Which brings us to Section 3, the beautiful ones, the doomed generation. Now, the pups that did manage to somehow survive that chaos were raised without any model of a functioning society. Calhoun called this isolated new generation the beautiful ones. And the reason why is chilling. Their fur stayed absolutely flawless because they never got into a single fight. They completely opted out of the species. They never tried to mate, they never engaged in violence, and they participated in zero social activities. Literally all they did was eat, sleep, and obsessively groom themselves to visual perfection. They moved through the crowded colony like no other mouse even existed. There's this one quote from Calhoun that just hits the nail on the head. They looked externally like the healthiest mice in the entire colony. They were also functionally dead. Their nervous systems had developed in a world where every single social role was already filled by someone else. Without any space to carve out their own identity or purpose, they became completely incapable of socializing, mating, or carrying on the colony. Looking at the numbers, the mathematical drop-off is just sheer. On day 560, the population peaked at just 2,200 mice. Remember, this thing was designed to comfortably hold 3,800. It never even came close to capacity. By day 920, the very last successful conception occurred, and after that, the colony just aged. On May 23, 1973, exactly 4 years and 10 months after Calhoun shut the lid, the very last mouse in Universe 25 died. The extinction was absolute. Section 4. The Two Deaths. When Calhoun broke down this total collapse, he realized the mice actually suffered two totally distinct types of death. The real tragedy of Universe 25 is the death of the spirit, which was the total loss of their social structure, their purpose, and their natural behavior. And this happened years before their physical bodies actually gave out. The society died long before the last heartbeats. The beautiful ones, the apathetic males, the overwhelmed mothers, they were physically alive, sure, but spiritually and functionally extinct. Let's move to Section 5, the real killer, correcting the myth. Okay, so when this paper actually came out, the public completely misinterpreted the data. The popular narrative became this myth, that comfort and abundance are inherently deadly and that a life with no struggle inevitably destroys itself. People loved using the beautiful ones as a metaphor for the decay of modern comfortable life. But the reality, which is backed up by the hard data, proves something entirely different. It wasn't the comfort that destroyed them. It was the total disappearance of meaningful roles. Listen to this quote, because it is absolutely crucial to this entire explainer. If the number of individuals capable of filling meaningful roles greatly exceeds the number of roles available, only violence and disruption can follow. The mice didn't die from having too much food or too soft a bed. They died because the society completely evaporated their reasons to participate. The structure that gave each individual a reason to be alive simply ran out. Section 6. Escaping Universe 25. Now, here's the genuinely uplifting part of this data. Calhoun wasn't some massive doomer. He believed that, unlike mice, we humans possess a very unique tool. He called it ideational generativity. It sounds like a super complex term, but it basically just means that when our physical space contracts and all the physical roles fill up, we have the ability to extend ourselves into conceptual space. We can create new ideas, build new networks, and literally invent new, meaningful roles that never existed before. So, the real takeaway from this perfectly designed, deadly utopia: a lack of friction didn't wipe out the mice. A lack of purpose did. And while the mice were entirely trapped by their biology and their physical enclosure, we aren't. Our survival depends entirely on our ability to continually create new meaning and new roles for each other. The extinction data from Universe 25 is just sitting right there, basically daring us to choose differently. It forces us to look at our own society and really ask how we distribute purpose. So I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. As our world gets more comfortable and far more automated, what happens next? What meaningful roles are you going to build for yourself and for those around you?